Applause for Isis Mussenden and Lynn Thomas. How should we arrange to...
I'll sit there. Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah. I feel...
And I'll pull back because this table.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, this was the first time the two of you've been part of the Academy for Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, but actually on a film production, this was the first time you worked together.
Yes.
That's correct. We've been, both of us were on the Board of Governors at the Academy. We were, the Academy is made up of, I think, 19 branches? You have editors, production designers, costume designers, studio executives, directors, and there are three people from each, three people who are elected.
Who represent each branch.
Yes, so we came in, we started the same year, and we were both there for 6 years, and both of us got elected to be vice presidents of, I was vice president of education and outreach.
And I was vice president of the new Academy Museum when it opened.
Right.
So we spent 6 years working closely, getting to know each other. And we never worked together when we were on the board, but then we finished and we had reached our time when you couldn't run anymore. And then this one called me up.
Yeah, I got her the job.
Hey, do you want to come to Texas with me?
That's exactly right. So
And how was it for the two of you to work together finally on a production?
it was great.
Yeah. It was, I mean, because you can get along with people outside of work and all that kind of stuff. But what was fantastic was we had this visual synergy. The two of us, we started off trying to learn about, what we wanted, and he would do his boards and I would do my boards, and we were doing our research together, which we both love, and sharing information. And all of a sudden we realized after a very short period of time, we were on the same page. So there was a great trust instantly built.
That's correct.
As you can tell, it worked. So
Yeah.
it was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal sets, phenomenal costumes. It's really quite an achievement also to think that this is not only all we saw, right? Like this is just a one
There were
episode.
eight episodes. We started, there were supposed to be 6, and then they almost shut down the production. And then we were like, okay, we'll wait. And they waited a week. We were all in Texas still working. And then they turned around and went, and we thought, oh, they're gonna pull it. And they went, we're gonna do 8 instead of 6. So they made it bigger.
Wow.
And we were like, oh my goodness. So
Yeah, and there is a simpatico here, and there is a sort of instinctual understanding between the two of us, and I think normally what would be happening is that you would be having much. We didn't have too many. What would happen is that I would go down to visit her.
in my
And
space.
I would look at her, while I was there, I would be looking at her boards, looking at all the work that she was doing. And then she would come upstairs and do the same for me. So it wasn't as if there was clearly a connection there. We could in terms of the type of images that we were putting
That's
together. And of course, as she said earlier, her actors would come and the director would come and take a look at both our boards. And what happens also is that you have executives and you have these boards and you put them up in the hallways. That's what we did on this job.
We put them up everywhere. Hallways, offices, things. So every PA and every person in every department would be wandering by it, and we just felt engulfed in both the images, in all our images, and I think it helped everybody on the production.
That's
of
right.
course.
So everyone could see the choices and the decisions that we were making. And then the other thing I would do is that if as I was making color decisions, and if I particularly felt that I was making an unusual color decision, I would send her down a sample of that color decision so that she would have it ahead of time. And then the other thing that I was doing, which I wasn't always obvious about it, is that I was walking through the costume department. I would be looking to see everything that she was doing. So I was aware. I was always aware.
But we just were kind of cataloging it in our heads as we would go through each other's departments. Again, pulling a lot of similar images, but mine were more of the people and portraits, and
Right.
his was of the landscape and the houses and the, the specifics in different ways with people in the. And sometimes I go, "You're holding back on me. Give me that. That has so many great images in it." And I literally go, "Can I have a copy of that?"
Yeah.
But between the two, it just felt we were very much heading in the same direction and trying to complement each other color-wise.
Yes.
And in your other productions, is this something that you usually do to exchange between costume design and production design all your boards with one another?
Yeah, I think that's pretty
Yeah,
standard.
we try to do it. Sometimes it's sometimes you don't get as much going back and forth for whatever reason. I mean, I think the space is important. It's nice to have these spaces where we can put everything up, but you really do try. And like look at art department will send me. The locations are really important to me too. So as they get set, they sent them to me, and I work very closely with the set decorators
That's right.
on all my projects, because that's the color of the couch, the color of the pillows, the sheets on the bed, the curtains, and we connect directly. So whoever has it first kind of sends it to the other, and then we try to make sure that we find some complement for or clash or whatever is necessary for the story.
The set decorator is my key collaborator in the art department. He or she, that person, is responsible for putting all the detail into the sets. And we had a brilliant set decorator on this movie,
And
but also
props.
props. But he has the set decorator, Adrian Segura was the name of the person. He has his boards as well, because again, what we're trying to do, especially when you're doing a period film, is you're trying to make sure that you're supporting the time period correctly, and you also want to make sure that you're putting up on the boards details that are specific for each set, because you're going to want to bring in addition to us sharing that information, you're bringing the producers and the directors by and taking a look at all these boards, and that is how you're relaying how you're telling the story to the crew.
Yeah, the story starts to take place in these walls and walls of, and we keep building and put up. And I mean, I would have extras. We went from 1,900 to 5,000 extras on the show.
Wow.
And 3 other Westerns were happening at the same time. So we were running out of clothes. And even though we had built hundreds and hundreds of pieces, rented as many as we could, but there would be these walls, and I'm running around. I've got all these characters. We're all doing in and out. We're shooting at the same time, and the extras dressers who dress the extras would get stuck. And I would take them to the walls, and I would go, look at the characters in each and every one of these pictures, and tell a story about them, and think about it. So when you're dressing an extra, you don't just find a shirt and a pair of pants. Just go, the guy walks in, what's he kind of look like? Or the girl walks in, what does she kind of look like to you? And then have fun with it. Create a story, even though you're never going to know it, but you're going to dress them a certain way. And that would come off the boards. They would literally walk into the hall and go, that one.
Oh, wow.
And then they'd run back and go, that works good with that tie.
And also, if you have questions, this is please just raise your hand. It is now the last session where we have you to ask. While you guys are thinking about questions, I would want to ask something that we discussed earlier already about historical accuracy. And when you said something really wonderful about the Great Depression, which we saw in the Cinderella Man, the first film we watched today, and that basically our collective memory thinks of the photos we've seen, which are mostly black and white photos. And I think also when it comes to Westerns, we are so full of all the not the actual photographies, but the movies we've seen. And so I feel like often movies and shows become references of the movies and shows that have been before. And I was curious how you were balancing that line between historical accuracy and what feels right, what feels like a Western, what feels right, also emotionally accurate for the characters. And if that was like maybe also a discussion with Taylor Sheridan, the creator of the show.
No.
No. Taylor wasn't really the creator. It was Chad.
Chad Feehan.
Chad Freehan was the showrunner, and he was our showrunner and our creative.
Okay. So color for me is emotional. It's not intellectual. So my decisions are based on what feels right, what I think feels right for the show, for the specific. It's not an intellectual process. It's all about what feels right, what I think feels right for the project that we're doing. What will happen for me is that I will actually go through my color book, those swatch books we have, and I'll just go and I'll pick out colors that I think are appropriate for the project. And it's not intellectual. It's completely emotional. This feels right. And then I will use those colors for the sets. And when I start gathering wallpapers and start putting sets together, then once I make those decisions, I will share those decisions with the costume designer. And that's what it is for me, because we built
A lot.
We built towns. We built almost all the structures that you see were built from scratch. There is quite, if you're not looking at photographs from that time period, there are quite a few paintings. So again, as you were talking about, you should be using paintings. But you surround yourself with images that inspire you, and you take what feels right from those images.
Yeah, and then I have a palette that we've talked about with production design. And if the cinematographer's on, because often the cinematographer comes in a little late. So I see what palette he's working with. And then once I get my cast, then I start to figure out who I can work with in this palette. Now, we don't want it all to be monochromatic unless that's the idea. But, so then in this particular show, I was really involved with textures and patterns helped me because these people only had one or two outfits. We got to have a journey arc with Jenny because they do become wealthier. The lawmen at that time made a boatload of money, a shocking amount of money in our research. So we find this, through our research. So we get to take them from the old homestead where they first start as unsuccessful farmers into society. Just post-emancipation, which was a different time in America before Jim Crow. So it's an era that is not depicted a lot, and I don't think I've ever seen an African American story depict this particular time. So that's where the reality comes in. I want to make sure we're telling that story because that's a surprising story to a lot of people.
Are there any questions? Just raise your hand.
Are you involved in the decision about the format? About if it's 4:3
The
or
aspect ratio.
5 or 2:1, the format of the frame, the image?
So, and sorry, before you answer, I know it's annoying, I have to repeat it for the recording. Are you involved into the decision of the aspect ratio?
No.
I am absolutely not involved in
that's
that.
really that really is the responsibility of the cinematographer.
And
It makes a big difference for you.
Yes, and I think what people don't realize is that all those landscapes that you see, all the those the campsites, all those are chosen by the production designer, working very closely with locations. And then what happens is that you go on a scout where the cinematographer is there and the director is there, and then those things very often will change because they will get there and they'll want something else. But again, what you're looking for is a visual picture that will help place the audience where it's supposed to be, or give us, so sometimes the woods are very open, sometimes they're open landscapes, but again, one is making choices that are servicing the action in the scene, but also servicing the overall look of the project.
And could I ask, because you mentioned earlier that the cinematographer came in late, or rather late. Is this something you made it sound like this is something that happens more often, that you guys are working much earlier and the cinematographer is?
Oh, Wynn is always on before the cinematographer.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Always. And then I am often on before the cinematographer. They will come in, and let's say a feature shooting, 58 days or something, or 50 days, a feature. Sometimes the cinematographer is in like 4 weeks before in prep, maybe even 3, depending if they have another job, So
That's
it's
great. Yeah, we didn't
yeah,
get
that is the
we
norm.
didn't get our cinematographers until very late in the process. So the collaborative process on a series like this, the person that we didn't get our directors. Let's talk about, we forgot about that. We didn't get our directors until very late.
Wow.
I mean, it was
In television, though, fair enough. In television, we have a showrunner is the
showrunner
main
is-
creative, not
yes,
the directors.
yes.
The directors, we had 2 sets of directors.
Yes.
But he's right; it wasn't determined until days before. So, and the prep for something like this is massive. So I started in August. You started in July.
Right.
We didn't shoot till January. So we got those directors like in December or something.
Right.
So you can't wait around.
Right. So the show, your main person, the person you're going to for decisions, artistic decisions, is the showrunner on a television show. So,
And I was curious, and I understand this is a delicate subject, but are you able to talk about the budget in terms of how much your department had over the production? I also understand
look,
if this is.
I don't
no,
care.
I don't think it's
I mean,
delicate
now that
subject.
it's over
What it was? What do we? Was it 15 million per episode?
per episode.
We had $15 million per episode.
We had
which
a
is
lot of money.
Which is a lot. But again, almost every structure that you're seeing in this was built from scratch.
Right.
Every structure, because it's 1870s. You can't go out and find it. So you're building everything.
And like I said, you can't dress 5,000 extras on a low budget. But, I'm going to say something about that. Time is just as important as money, because there's only 24 hours in a day. So, the demands to pull this off. I mean, I worked every weekend. I had a crew of 42 people just in the costume department. So, I mean, it's about manpower and time as well as money.
We had the town that you see, which I'm just blanking on the real name of the town, but in the script it's called Dakota.
Dakota, yeah.
I was lucky in the sense that we scouted on this for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and I found a town that still had standing structures. There was like 2 businesses in the town. And so as a result, I was able to go, there was the exterior of the buildings, we were able to fix those up so they felt correct from a period point of view, but it also gave me the ability to build sets on the interiors. So that whole bordello, all that bordello stuff, all of that was built, and therefore what it gave us the ability for the actors to start on the outside and move inside. So camera could take, you could start outside and travel with the actor to the inside. So although the great thing for us from a physical point of view was that we had control. It was like a standing set, on a studio on a lot, because there were no businesses there, and it allowed us to come in to alter and build sets on the interiors of all these locations.
And may I ask you, Wynn, because I know a lot of production designers are also here, how big was your department, if you remember the number?
I have no. It was a huge. I have. There was an army of people, but I also I had we had an art director. We had art directors. I had several assistant art directors. You have set designers, and then the locations department, which is also quite huge. And here's the problem. We were shooting this in Fort Worth, Texas, because Taylor Sheridan was supposed to direct the pilot, and he lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and did not want to travel. Okay, so if we had shot this in Austin, Texas, there would have been existing towns there. The landscapes, the physical landscapes that we needed, would have been in Austin, that part of Texas. There was nothing in Fort Worth. Nothing.
No infrastructure for making movies whatsoever.
The entire crew had to be brought in.
Or you had to get locals that didn't know what they were doing.
Yes, at the expense of $5 million, because everyone had to be brought in and housed. Okay? So what that also meant is that when we were scouting locations, there was nothing in the immediate Fort Worth area, which means that every time we went scouting, we were traveling 30 to 40 minutes, sometimes 60 minutes, to get to that location.
I just have to interject because all I remember is like, where's Wynn? Oh, he's scouting. Where's Wynn? Oh, he's scouting. Where's Wynn? And one day I came in and he was there and I'm like, oh, here. He goes, all I do is scout. I'm in a truck. I'm in a van all day long. When am I going to do my work? When am I going to? He was just so frustrated because it was just like, it's so many miles we would cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was.
But it was also when there was no infrastructure for film. Like if we had gone to Austin, has a history of filmmaking. They have stages, they have craftsmen, they have supplies, they have it's just more of an infrastructure. And we were just in Fort Worth, Texas. Honest to God, there was nothing. I had to build all my workspace. I had to rack it out. I had to put all a dye room. We had to create everything. The mill, which was next to us, which is never perfect. Dust and costumes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So but each job gives you a different set of parameters, that you have to, come up and face and make the best of. I've built many shops all over the world because we end up in a warehouse or some podunk back town.
I think didn't you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Since you mentioned that it's not an intellectual process at the first side, and then you continue choosing the colors and so on, do you have any experts involved in the process to make a historical accuracy check at the end, or is it like do you have this communication, or is it mainly based on your research and you are the expert in that sense?
It's usually based on research. I had a situation on this film, which I'm going to talk about publicly for the first time. We built several Native American communities in this film, and there's a whole sequence that's supposed to be with the Choctaw community. I put my art department looked like America. There were all kinds of people there. There were white men, there were white women, there were black people, there were, so because I try and mix it up. I try and make sure that it's representation. Also, I was in Texas, so I wanted to make sure that I had members of the Native American community in my art department because, again, I think wherever I'm working should be reflective of that community. Okay, there's a reason I'm telling you this. So I had hired a young woman from the Native American community to come and work on the film as a PA. All right, so we have this Choctaw community, and there's research that's available that shows you how they lived in real time. in real time, they lived in log cabins. The problem with the project and with the show itself is that there were too many log cabins. So I decided I was inspired by research that came from Southwest.
Texas.
It was actually New Mexico. There was an Indian community there that was living in stone structures, which I felt were closer to what I was trying to do emotionally for the sequence. So we went ahead and I designed this whole sequence. It was a whole big action sequence there. And I was going to put the community on the top of a mountain out and living in stone structures. In reality, the Choctaw was living in wooden log cabins. Okay. So what happened was this young woman filed a complaint because she felt that we weren't doing what was real. I was trying to do what I always do, which was what was emotionally correct. And she felt that we were not respecting history. So it became a big controversial moment, and we had to go back to making it in log cabins. Now, depending on what side of the fence you're on, depends on who you think is right. I was trying to serve the emotional journey, and for her, it was important that so she filed the complaint, and we had to make the change, go back to what was historically correct. Will the audience know that that was a problem? No, but I certainly will know, and I think the director will know, because everybody had approved the structures that I had chosen because they were servicing the scene and they were servicing the emotion of the scene. Instead, what we got was just more log cabins.
You were building that contrast that I was talking about earlier
That's
today.
correct.
There is story and contrast. And when it all becomes one thing, it's harder for the audience. It's just, I get it. I remember.
Yeah. So, no.
Yeah.
I have a question. Since like there are so many costumes and also so many props and everything, what happens afterwards with them? Are you also like part of the process, or also questions regarding recycling or so? Should I repeat the question? Sorry. Okay. All right. I was curious about what happens with the costumes and with the set design after the film, and if you're also still part of this process, and if some of the costumes are recycled for other films and things like that. Yes, if you take every department in filmmaking, I promise you costumes is the most sustainable because we recycle everything. We use old clothes over and over and over and over again. When we make clothes, we give it back to the costume shops. They rent it over and over and over again. So the sourcing, which I had taken out of my thing today, I should have left it in, but I had a whole thing about sourcing. So we source from the costume shops, which means they're rental shops like you have here and all over Europe. And then I make, because I needed multiples when we were starting, even before we had a cast, I counted up to 35 cowboys getting shot off a horse. So I started making sets of 34 sets of 30 costumes just to build something we owned. So when we own it, we can cut it, we can dye it, we can put a hole in it, we can blow it to bits. It's what the purpose is of having it. And then the third way was that we bought like some hats, and we had hats being made and some boots being made. And then when we ran out of clothes, when they upped my extras, I even went to Cornejo here in Madrid, where I have rented many times. And I got hold of Paula there and said, I need more costumes for the bordello, for this, for that. So then I rented another 46 crates from Madrid. Now, at the end, you have to organize it all. You have to put it back in place. The rental costumes all go back to their house. The costumes that we made that were left, they kept them because Taylor Sheridan's company is very involved in Westerns. So then that was saved for another, that becomes their property.
And then for 1923, or if they do another thing, then that was available for them. The principal clothes gets cataloged and put away until the project's done. And then who knows what happens to it. But it is very much all recycled.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is there something that you've learned throughout your years of practice that you think if you would have known that earlier in your career that it would have saved you a lot of, I don't know, nerves, pain, or time?
Every day. I truly know that my lessons have been a building block since day one. And every lesson I learn, I try not to make that same mistake the next time. Therefore, now it's in my catalog and makes my job a little smoother. But every single job, there's always something you've never come across. This is part of the high of doing it, because if it was the same all the time, I would go crazy. That's not why I'm in this business. I didn't want a regular job. So every job builds and builds and builds. And you have to have those lessons for yourself, because you wouldn't, for me to tell you what they were, you can't understand. I mean, not that you can't understand. It won't be relevant. They're relevant when they happen to you and you go, oh, I solved this way. Now I've got that in my toolbox and I'm off to the next one. But the next one will bring something else too. But, you know, you can go back 4 movies and go, I know how to solve that. So,
I think it's important to be able to read. This is something that people don't do anymore. And people have let this go. They've stopped reading. I think it's important because, again, when you are reading on a regular basis, you can see something in your head. And if you don't read, it's hard to work in this business, because you really are, I know I said this earlier in the day, but you really truly are turning the writer's words into visuals. That's what we do.
That's the high.
And you have to be able, and again, I encourage you, if you guys, because nowadays folks have stopped reading, it's very important to read books, because it has to become a skill set that you have. This is what I believe on a personal level. When I started out in the business, as a young designer, I used to read the script, then I would go out and I would find research that I felt was supporting the script. Yeah. And then I would go and show the locations person and say, find me this. I don't do that anymore. Now I'm not as rigid. Now I just kind of go out and I start scouting, because the great joy of doing my job is that I'm constantly, so something can come along that will have a huge impact. I'm much more easy about letting stuff in. I'm not as rigid about what I'm trying to do. I'm open to what I'm seeing. Like, I've been here for the last couple of days. The thing that's been fantastic is just walking down the street and seeing all these fantastic buildings and seeing alleys and seeing rooftops. And it's just, so I think what I'm trying to say here, as I've gotten older and I've learned more, I'm more open to the surprises and to the possibilities that are out there that I don't expect. And that will have an impact on the decisions I make.
I couldn't agree more with Wynn about reading. I read a lot of novels and historical fiction sometimes too. And I love to read a book that's about the time that I'm depicting. I can only do this very early in the process, because once I've gotten into the script, I can't read until the whole movie's over. I really can't. I can't get involved in another story because it's all right up here in my head. And I'm not crazy 24 hours a day, but I realize it doesn't leave me, and everything is related to it. But to just as I'm reading, I mean, I guess this is what makes us visual people. you're just visualizing it. How many times have you read a book and you see the movie and you go, that's not the way it looked, because in your head you made the movie. It's so fantastic. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Are there more questions? Oh, Barbara, yeah. Microphone is coming to you.
Yeah, you're probably more used to work with high budgets than we are, and so you probably are more into this working in studios and in built sets. And but I'm curious, if you have the possibility to decide, am I going to build something or am I going to let a dress be sewed? What is the question? What are you thinking about if you do it, or if you work on location, or if you use a
I'll go first with
Yeah, okay.
costume. Sure, I'll go first with costume. I spent 10 years doing independent film with no money. It's nothing I've ever forgotten. And even since then, I've made movies with friends in 18 days. So the fact that you have to be resourceful. I've taken clothes out of people's closets. I've taken clothes out of my closet on a regular basis just to get that. I've taken a belt off a grip and put it on somebody. I gave him one to hold his pants, but I did take it off. I traded good hat, a new cowboy hat for a old broken down cowboy hat from some guy off the street because it was aged already and it wasn't going to take me as much time, and it was perfect. You just have to be resourceful. So I also will take a thrift dress, and because I can sew and I have the ability to create, you change the skirt, or you cut it off and make it a skirt, or it's actually sometimes even more fun than having all the money in the world. I know that sounds crazy, but it's very, very true, because you're finding creative solutions within the parameters, which makes you think harder and makes you more creative. So there's no excuse for not thinking about costumes on low budget stuff. Absolutely not. There's thrift shops, there's closets, there's everything you can think of. You can paint things, you can dye things. I mean, I always think of, I won't take away from Wynn because he's going to tell you how to do it too. But, a can of paint is not expensive. And emotionally, a color against a wall can change the world. So I can take a dress, if I dip it and I change the color, or I add a tool on top of it, there's so many ways to do it. And I encourage you, just don't get caught up in the money. Just think about what you emotionally want to get across.
Yeah, I try not to do them much anymore, but I have gone back and done $5 million films and $7 million films. Yeah. But again, the search process, the creative process does not change. It just means that I'm looking for things I'm looking for locations that are where 90% of that location doesn't need any work at all, and I'm coming in and I'm adding an element. However, it doesn't lessen the search. The search for that location does not change. The caliber, the standard I have in terms of that location still has to service the script and the director's vision. So the process itself does not change whether it's a low budget or a big budget film. When I'm working with students, or things I tell young people or young writers who are writing, and they're writing scripts and they're trying to get their scripts done, is they should be writing their stories and they should try and do them with exterior locations. The minute you write a script that has a lot of interiors, you're adding money. But if you write stories that are taking place mostly outside, it's usually significantly cheaper, So that's so if you're writing a story where you can tell it with exterior locations, it's usually cheaper. It's just less expensive. The minute you step inside someone's home or a hotel or whatever, you're adding money to the budget. When when we did, I mean, again, when we did She's Gotta Have It, we had no money. Okay. I think my budget on that film was $800. Just think about that, $800. So I used my personal stuff, but also we chose a building where we could do our primary locations, and then all the sort of secondary locations were located throughout the rest of the building. So it meant that we didn't have to move locations that much. And I will do that on a regular, here's the other thing. What I've also learned in the business is that you have first ADs who responsibility is to put the schedule together. I don't want that schedule determining what the look of the movie is. So I will always be conscious of how I'm putting locations and sets together so that it will work with the schedule. That way I can get a set that I want, as opposed to, because as I say to them all the time, no one's going to look at a film and says, oh, what a fantastic schedule. No one. So I work very hard. I work very closely with my first AD to pair different settings together so that I have control and they're not telling me everything on that. So I'll tell you this again. The Dolliver cabin, the cabin that we saw, was not my first choice. It was dictated by the schedule. And I had other locations that I felt were more appropriate for that particular story and for the action in that sequence. If you've noticed in that sequence, there's a whole huge fight between the two brothers, right? So, but they needed to shoot this sequence paired with other stuff on the schedule. Well, I had meetings. I said, look, I'm giving you guys these other choices, but what was running the machine was the schedule. Okay, so I had a meeting. I finally got fed up with what I was hearing. I said, all right, here's what's going to happen. You guys have 2 days to shoot this sequence. It's going to take you, if you go into this location, it's going to take you 4 to 5 days because you don't have enough space for the camera. There was no space for the camera in that sequence. You're not going to be able to, it's going to take you much longer to stage the action. So what happens? Okay, we're going to go. We'll make it work. I accepted their decision. It works all right from a visual point of view. Took them 5 days to shoot it.
Yep.
May I ask the two of you, or do you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, the other thing that really drives the schedule is actor availability. When you're changing, when all these day players are coming in. So, I mean, it's crazy. They want to work on Monday morning and they're going to fly them in Sunday afternoon. So these are the kind of things that you're constantly, we are constantly, I don't want to even say fighting. You just got to stand your ground with the producers to say, well, you're not going to get your product if you bring them in Sunday afternoon. I'm going to need them on Friday, and we're going to have to work on Saturday. So it's always, the schedule and actors' availability. Schedules hits actors' availability for me.
We have another question. Just if the microphone can come down. Just in the meantime, I wanted to ask you really quickly this struggle about production realities, time constraints, money constraints, the schedule. How far do you go pushing your creative vision and saying like, well, this is necessary for the emotional impact of the film? And when do you go and accept what the producers or the line producers or the first AD says?
I don't put up with too much bullshit anymore. I mean, you're hiring me to do a job. I know who I am. I know what I bring, and I fight very hard. And if you don't want that, don't hire me.
I think over time, and as your confidence builds, and as you know your job better, I I know my job better than anyone on that crew. Anyone. I know, because I know how long and how hard it was for me to learn it. So that, when I finally got that kind of confidence, which was not there, I promise you, for many years, then I could speak confidently, directly and confidently. Again, they hired me. Again, I'm here for a reason. And the calmer and more confident I speak the truth, I think production wants to know the truth. They want to know that they're going to go over. If they're smart, if production's smart, they'll go, no, we don't want it. But they're listening, and then they're going to adjust because it's in the script. All I say is it's here. I didn't write the script, so it's here. Either do you want to change it? If you're going to change it, then I'll adjust. But if it's here, this is what you are doing, then this is what it's going to take. We have, for example, on Wheel of Time, we have an army. They come in, they say it's going to be 35 members of this small army of this certain culture that's got to be built head to toe, and then multiples and doubles and stuntmen. And I go, okay, I budget it and I give it to them. And then they go, it's not going to be more than 35. The line producer says, right? And I'm like, he never gets his way. They come back, they double it. What's that going to take? Well, it's going to be this much more money and this much more time and this amount of overtime in materials and you can't cut it any other way. I can't give you 60 people for the price of 30. And I always pull out, for me, I go, it's math. It's simple mathematics. It is what it is. I'm going to tell a quick story because it's something that was the impetus of giving me this confidence. Years ago, there was a costume supervisor. It was a male costume supervisor, which I'll say in America, they get their way a lot more. That's just saying. So he walks into the office. It was a thing about an army again, a 350-strong army. And he comes in, he says, this is how much it's going to be to the line producer. Too much money, too much money. He goes, oh, that's what it's going to be. Well, can you do it for this? He goes, no, that's what it's going to be. He goes, look, you need an army. I need patio furniture. Basically saying, I'm here for you. I'm here to produce what you need because this is what's in your script and you've asked me for this. You have to take I take the emotion out of it when I get to that point and become very matter of fact. And that confidence is like, I don't need an army. Yeah. Personally.
And what I do also is like, it's in the, I agree with you, as Isis is saying, it's in the script. And what I will say to people, well, if you don't want it, you have to get the director to cut it.
Yeah.
It's not my,
get your way.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the very interesting insights. You've mentioned earlier that you've lived to 80s New York and stuff. And I wanted to ask you, because I'm very interested from a European perspective, like, what was it like to start off in the American film industry, and how much has it changed over the years in your...
Well, as I said, and as Wynn and I both, we started an independent film. And at that time, independent film was a strictly non-union, very, very independent film for a decade. And then more got unionized, and there were more, even small budgets can be union films now. So that feels a little different. It can't be quite as renegade. How's it changed? I mean, technology has changed film. I think for me, that's the biggest change. Shooting in America versus shooting abroad, for me, that's a different story. I feel when I'm abroad, I'm shooting a large independent film. Because everybody kind of does everything. And it's like a group of us, even if it's a big group, we all chip in and we're all working. Everybody has their specialties, but if someone else needs help. On the strict unions in the United States, that can't happen. They departmentalize so much. So having come from independent film and have enjoyed that, I mean, I literally love to sew. So I'll come in and I'll do a hem. You know, if I'm nervous, they say, hand her a needle. You know, if I can't think or things are taking too long, I just, you know, so I like to be in the shop. The workshop is my favorite place. So the fact that we could all do different things is great. And that the biggest difference between shooting in America and shooting abroad is that there's a big definitive line. She does this, she does that, he does this, he does that, which wastes a lot of time. But, you know, I mean, there's also the flip side, which is decent pay and protections and pensions, and that's the reality of the other side. Does that answer your question? No.
I just think technology is changing things.
Yeah, I think technology.
And it's in many cases eliminating jobs that used to be there, but not completely. So I don't really know. I'm not sure how to answer the question. I think each decade, there are changes that come with each decade. There was a time period, for example, when I started in the film business, that you could put any painting up on the wall, you could have you could put any graphic up on a wall, okay? Anything, whatever you wanted, you could go out.
You could wear a
buy it,
logo on a shirt. You could wear anything.
And nowadays, what happened was, and again, most people don't, there's a wrestler named Hulk Hogan who someone used his picture in a movie and he sued. And that created a windfall that has been a nightmare, because nowadays you cannot use any graphic images that you don't create within the art department. So as a result, and I think
It's down to a tattoo. We cannot show a tattoo because the tattoo artist owns the rights.
So where this is harmful is when you're doing a character-driven set, sometimes you can't go out and get the details that would be appropriate for that set. So it's actually destroying the truth that we're trying to tell about characters.
It waters it down because then we don't get the social connections that person. Let's take a bedroom, a young boy's bedroom. You know, if you can't put Beckham on the wall or whatever, you know what I mean? If you can't do those things, you lose part of the story, you know, because now it gets all watered down.
Yeah. It becomes generic as opposed to specific. So, but what it has done is that the initial art department that I was in, we didn't have graphics people. Now, because this is such a huge problem and it's a legal problem, we now have 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 graphic people who are just designing, because everything has to be, and then all of the images that you design have to be cleared by a clearance department on the studio. I mean, it's a nightmare. This is just to dress the sets, so it's crazy. I mean,
I'm always calling the art department, can you do me a graphic for this T-shirt? Because even a graphic tee we can't put on somebody.
That's one of the ways that it's changed. But so it gets more complicated.
And we are obviously going into even faster changing technologies as we speak. And I'm curious what you are thinking about the future of production design and costume design. What excites you about the future of those departments? What scares you potentially about the future?
You know, I know everyone's talking about AI. I still think you're going to need a person to input something into the machine. So I still think it's going to be, you're still going to need artists to tell the machine what to do, I think. I do worry that it's going to eliminate certain kinds of jobs. But I hope that good storytelling does not disappear as a result of it. That's what I think is happening right now.
Well, in regard to AI will produce a lot of mediocrity. It'll produce formulaic rom-coms and formulaic TV shows with a click of a button. And that's sad, but it's true. What it won't be able to create is a movie like Parasite or Everything Everywhere All at Once. It won't be able to be creative on its own. And therefore, that kind of base creativity will have to come from us. So that's one thing. As far as directly connected with my department, I mean, I can't say, I feel like we're still so analog. I mean, we still have fabric and we still have bodies until until the technology creates the actor, the clothes, and everything, and it's all just fantasy. I mean, it's all data. We still have to make it. You still have to put a wall. You still have to sit in a chair. So our jobs has not changed as much the way we do it or the way anyone does it, other than the way we communicate and scanning things and stuff. But I feel like the cinematographers' jobs have changed way more than ours. Because when I started, they shot film, and there were no monitors, and there was a camera operator who was the DP. It was a camera operator, DP, and they looked through that eyepiece, and the director had to have confidence that what they were seeing and what the frame was that was going to come out. And then they took that film and they sent it to the lab. And I always thought, these guys deserve every penny they get, because tomorrow, I've gotten a lot of bad pictures back from tomorrow that picture's got to come out because we've moved locations already. And that was a big, big difference. Now we shoot digitally, everybody's in a tent. You can change the color, you can change this. I can't change the dress. I can't change the hair. We can't change the set. But cinematography can change.
Here's what I think that's important. We're all filmmakers in this room, which means that we're storytellers. And the thing that's going to keep the business going is if we continue to tell good stories. So, technology is not going to matter. This is why I keep saying you have to read books, because all of you have to learn how to tell stories. And then you work with a team of people who will make that story into a film. Every single person here is a storyteller. That's who you are. That's who we are. And the hope is that you can start off as a storyteller, and then at some point or another in your career, someone will say to you, you are an artist, because that is the goal.
Lovely. Lovely, Will.
Are there more questions? Yeah, Elena? No, it's good. Now that we have you, it's good to... Ja, aber es gibt irgendwo noch ein Mikrofon, oder? Es gibt nur da. Okay.
There are 3. See, I understood. There's only 3.
This is a question of a more personal nature, but I was wondering, first of all, which aspect of creation you find the most gratifying. And also, I mean, if you work on these like big productions like the TV show, for example, I'm just kind of wondering how that blends into your personal life, and if it's just non-existent for long periods of time, because it just looks like you would be gone for months at a time, and probably longer than that. And because I've, like, in my own experience, I've just been able to tell that sometimes it's really hard to make that transition from being so on for such a long time and then not at all.
Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey to balance life and work. Work is a huge part of my life. I did have a son, and my partner and I, we decided I would decide I'd do a film if it took me anywhere from 6 months to a year, and we would take him. And that was a great time, and that was during the Narnia movies, which I was very fortunate because they were kids' movies, and the kids had their families there, and so it was actually an adventure, an incredible adventure. He had the same babysitter in 3 different countries. That's how many families were together making those movies. So that was just fortunate. And then he said, "Can you stay home?" And then I stayed home for a while, and then I did TV, or it's you have to make your choices. yes, we're away and we're completely involved in something else, and your whole life goes on hold at home. There's no doubt about that. Your house is not cared for. You miss holidays, but you miss dinners with friends, and I hope you all make those choices to go to those very important things while you're shooting. I made the mistake a couple of times of not going to a wedding or not going to something where I should have just gone. But I learned. It's a tough balance. It's tough. It's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort, and I love what I do. So I rationalize it by the fact that when I'm done, I am 100%. It's my life. I don't have to do it. I don't have to get back to the office. I don't have to do anything. And then I use that time to regenerate, reconnect, and to continue moving my life forward in whichever way I wanted, a new house or do this or do that, whatever it is. Because it's true. Once you start that job and you get into it, it's very difficult to do much
Anything
more.
I agree. I mean, it's you shouldn't come into this business if you want a traditional life. You just shouldn't. You should avoid it. Don't even bother.
At all costs.
Yeah, and because it's going to take up all your time. I am not married. I am single, and that has always been an advantage to me. I have a small community of friends that I depend on for emotional support. But ultimately, in the end, I have given my life to the business, and that's a choice that I've made, and I'm happy with that choice. But this is not a business for everyone. And so if you want a sort of thing where you can see your family all the time and be, this ain't the
It
business.
just doesn't work.
This is not the business for you because it takes too much time and too many hours. And you should just, there's no dishonor in that. You should just be aware of the choice that you're making and accept it. And if you're lucky, you're surrounding yourself with people who will understand that choice that you're making. I do.
I think that's the hardest part is some people may not understand. Like, it's 8:30 and why aren't you home? You're like, really? You know what I mean? I think I'll just speak very personally. I made choices and I am very good with my choices.
And the most gratifying part of your job? That was the other part of the question. I think you could elaborate on that.
I think the moment, just little moments when all of it comes together and the props are done and the sets are there and we're just about to roll and everything is set and you're just like, wow, it's a little piece of magic. It's from another time, or it's a moment, it's a party, it's a train station that's all of a sudden I'm in 1942. And it's when that entire it's all lit, and I mean, it's those little highs, or when I finish a dress that I just loved, I can remember the roll of fabric over there, and now it's beautiful. So many hands have touched it. So many hours have been put into it. I mean, it's to me, making is my jam. I love to make, so I'd love to see the final product. And then, you have it for life is the other treat.
I'm very grateful for all the artists and craftsmen and women that I've worked with over the years, and that it's been an extraordinary journey and experience. And you do work with some extraordinary people. And I'm just so grateful for all those, that exchange and that connectivity that I have with all those individuals. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
It is really impressive to feel that you guys have been working in the industry for over 40 years and you still are so passionate and so driven, and it's palpable in the room, I think. And I wonder if you guys have techniques or habits, how to stay motivated, how to not run dry, how to kind of keep being creative, keep being driven and passionate. Because I think a lot of people run the risk of, after a few years or after a few decades, to just to be over it.
And if that happens, that happens. It's okay. I mean, in all honesty, I did hit a period about 15 years into my career, no, maybe a little over 10, where I just wasn't getting the projects. I was really disappointed. I wasn't challenged. And I thought, if this is what I have to do for the rest of my life in this business, I'm not going to do it. I just said, I'm not going to do it because it wasn't interesting anymore. And then something shifted and I got one job and I got another and then it shifted and then I got Shreks, which was like so crazy, you know. I was pregnant when I got Shrek, so I could be home drawing. I mean, somehow the universe was taking care of me. So it wasn't that there was a moment I was dry because I was uninspired. But once that inspiration came back, and like I said, I've never lost the love of making. And I guess that's what I held on to. And then it took off and yeah.
For me, I think in the very beginning of your career, you have to do what comes your way. You have to do the project because what you're trying to do is build your resume. And you're trying to work your way into the business. And then I think if you're lucky, you begin to have a choice in terms of the projects that you're doing. If you're lucky, very few of us, I think, are lucky. I've been very lucky in the sense that I've worked on. I'm very particular about what I work on. I really want to work on films that speak to the heart. So, you saw Cinderella Man. That's a story about a guy who will do anything to feed his family, right? Doesn't get more heartfelt than that. So I have very strict standards about. I'm lucky because I can honor my standards, and even to this day, I won't work on films that don't meet that standard. But I think I'm one of the lucky ones in the business.
No, that's, lucky and talented, but don't underplay that one. But when Wynn was just talking, I thought of something that I've said to a lot of people, and I really live by this. Because yes, when we started off, we did everything. We did everything not only to build your resume, but to learn and to meet people and to build and build and build. But that said, even at that point, you have. I've always given the advice: you have to have at least one really, really, really good reason to do it. It could be the money, the location, the time it's done, the script, the director. It fits into your life. Whatever it is, at least one incredibly solid reason to do it. Because when it gets hard, that's what you have to think about. And I please take that to heart. And it can be anything, really. I mean, I've done jobs for money. Are you kidding? Who am I? It's a job. I need money. I need to live. I've done it for the actors. I've done it for the script. I've done it because, I wasn't going to travel if I couldn't stay away a year, whatever it is. And somehow for me, I've been lucky because the universe took care of me. But just one, at least one. When it gets bad, you need to think about it.
There is another question. Oh, no, I guess, I'll keep that microphone with you.
Hi, thanks for all the insights. I have one question for you, Isis. How was it for you as a woman in the industry?
Well, first of all, as I told you earlier, I am the youngest of 5 with 4 older brothers. So I grew up with a pretty thick skin in general. They loved me to death and abused me equally. And I'm also, and I will always say this very honest, I'm in my position, we are mostly women and gay men. So we are fighting for like DPs and ADs and production designers. The women, as a woman, I wouldn't be fighting for a position. My competition is my women and mostly, gay men. So it's been fine because I've been used to being in a room of men. I will sometimes, when I start, I'd be the only woman in the room. But it didn't really, I never had any issues with that. But I have friends in other areas that have fought tooth and nail just to even be heard. Now, that being said, because of the position I have, there is incredible paid inequity. That is the problem. The inequity of the pay. I mean, we deal with the actors, which is a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. My responsibility is to make sure that that actor is ready to work, feeling right on the set, on time. If they don't like their clothes, if they don't like their hair, they're not coming out of the trailer. And then you have a nightmare. So it's like a side job. And you know, our work's on the screen. But because, again, we are women and gay men, we're underpaid. So we have been fighting for equity. That's our biggest issue.
When I started in the business, yeah, I think you mentioned this. I am the first African American production designer in history. Okay, so, however, I don't say that to too many people, but people don't.
We do.
But when I started, there were only 2 female production designers, Patricia von Bernstein, and I'm forgetting on the other person she did. What's the woman who did? Polly Platt. And I was fortunate enough to work with Patricia, who had a whole series of barriers that she had to break through in order to do her job. Because here you had this, she was a strong, dynamic woman who had to deal with all these men. And the thing is, with us, we're dealing with the workers. So we're dealing with workers, carpenters and painters. So it was very interesting to watch and see how she navigated that world. And that was very helpful for me to see that, because I learned from working with her. I mean, there were things that she did that I can't even articulate, but I observed that became part of my own work process. Fortunately, the world has changed, and there are now many women production designers, and I suspect that the dynamic has changed. There's quite a few, but so the world is getting better, is what I really want to say. I think that's true.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I would want to maybe close with one question, which is, Barbara, I'm looking to you. Do you? Yeah. Well, I'm just, since this is a wonderful opportunity to have you here and talk to young film students, but also people from the Film Designers Association, and basically you could say the future of Austrian cinema sits in front of you. What would you want to share with them or give them on their path when it comes especially to the collaborative role of production design and costume design within filmmaking?
Tell good stories. I said it to you already. That is the key. If you look at movies nowadays, they're terrible. They're terrible. And so that is your responsibility, is to tell stories that are going to be reflective of who you are, of who your community is, and to make stories that will service your community, but also will speak to the global community. That's your responsibility.
Yes, and do it together. You can grow together. You can start here and look around this room at the beginning of your careers, and I hope that there are at least 5, 6, or 7 of you that will be making films together 20, 30 years from now. Grow together, because it's a wonderful sense to make your mistakes and have your joys and move together through this world. And as Wynn said, of course, telling those stories that are relevant to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before I close completely, I know that Hannes and Monica wanted to also say something. So can I ask you to come on stage? Hannes Salat and Monika Buttinger, two of the most prolific filmmakers in Austria in production design and costume design.
Hello, I have to make a photo. It's so nice to see so much people here in this room. And it's so great that you're here and that you're interested in production design and costume design. And it was so touching hearing what you tell of the work and what is important and necessary. I really want to thank you that you come here to Vienna, and it was really, really, really great.
I think we did a big goal inviting you, and thank you for making this long travel to Vienna and sharing your experience with all of us. It was really great. Thank you so much.
It was our pleasure.
I have to make a photo of you.
Yes.
Let me make a photo.
It's going to take one there.
You want to stand here and make a photo of you, a photo.
No, with you. Have somebody, one of the, she can take the photo.
Ah, that's like that.
You need to be in
Ich habe Fotos gemacht dabei immer wieder, genau.